Great. So welcome everybody to this evening's or this afternoon, depending on where you are in Canada's webinar. This is an information session for the WUSC Refugee Support Network. And so my name is Ashley Korn, and I'm currently the manager of the Student Refugee Program with our in Canada operations. And we have Michelle. Excellent. So Michelle is going to start us off, and then I will sort of take over most of the facilitation for today. But we do have the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner. So please write your questions. And if you have specific questions, making sure we'll give opportunities to ask questions throughout and at the end. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat box. At this point, you will not be able to use your mic, I think, so it's best just to use the chat box for sort of technology purposes. Michelle louder, so we can go back and forth. Yeah, so I'll mute. Yeah. Okay, so Michelle's going to.
All right. Can you hear me now? At the top, I was telling Yari before, excellent. There's a little hands up thing, or you can give a check mark and say yes, or no, or applaud. There's no booing, unfortunately, or laughter, and the speak louder, speak softer icons. Hopefully you've found them. Maybe if you've found them, you can pick one that makes you happy and click it. And that way we'll be able to see that you have found this option. So at the top of the screen, above the, like where it says agenda, and there's sort of your speaker thing, your microphone thing, your webcam, and then the raise hand. And I'm gonna do agree. Yeah, some people did. Great. So we have, those who are just joining us and catching up, we have pretty good representation across the country. To give you a sense of how many people responded, we had over 100 people respond saying they're interested in participating in the Refugee Support Network. So as Ashley mentioned before, we're going to do a bit of an overview of why we've reached out to you for this initiative, and then tell you more about what is the blended visa office referred program in Canada, and what is this fund, and then how do we move forward for those who want to create sponsorship groups. So thank you all for joining the webinar, and some people will be listening afterwards through the recording, so thanks to those who are joining us a little later as well. So we figured it would be some of you were involved as local committee members, some of you have been involved as former SRP alumni, and we have different ranges of years that have decided to respond to this call to action to participate in the Refugee Support Network. So we figured we would give you just a small update of what's happening right now globally. If you've been following these issues, you probably know already that it's the worst forced displacement crisis that we've seen since the Second World War. I think it's probably surpassed that point. And there are 68.5 million displaced people around the world. And so the global community has identified this obviously as a crisis. And we're sort of in agreement that this is a crisis that surpasses what governments can do alone. And so there's a lot of talk around what can civil society do, what can different organizations do. WUSC has been working with, as you know, of course, universities for a long time, and we're sort of global leaders in this space right now in terms of engaging universities and student groups to sponsor refugees. But as part of this response, the Canadian government and different philanthropists have been trying to figure out ways to engage more civil society members, as well as how to leverage funds to have the greatest impact. So last year, when it became apparent that we wouldn't be able to meet the numbers that we had committed to through the different channels of immigration of refugees to Canada, there were some philanthropists who, in Canada, in the United States, who thought they didn't want the financial piece to be the barrier for refugee resettlement and integration. And so they said that they would put up some money that would help fund civil society's ability to engage on these issues and to allow more refugees to come to Canada. So some of you may recognize this slide from the Student Refugee Program Orientation or SRP 101 presentations, and now we actually fit onto a different category. So there are different ways that refugees come to Canada. The one that we're talking about and that we do through the Student Refugees Program is the overseas selection through resettlement. The WUSC Student Refugee Program falls under the private sponsorship. There's also refugees that come to Canada through government sponsorship, and they are referred to us by, look at that arrow. They're referred to us, to us, Canada, to the Canadian government by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. And somewhere in between these two models lies the blended visa office referred model. And basically it's a coming together of those two models where the responsibility and the costs are shared by civil society, by volunteers, and by the government. So in a typical blended visa office referred model, the cost would be shared 50-50. So if you read the emails that we've sent you, this is probably already apparent to you, but some people might have joined us that didn't receive the email but found out about this through other ways. So what is being proposed here by these philanthropists is that they would pay that 50% that normally the private sponsorship volunteers would have to pay. The government will still pay the other 50%. So when we heard about this fund, we thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity for us and our alumni to do something. Actually, someone had approached us saying, would you be willing to reach out and just let your alumni know that this opportunity exists? And we thought, well, yeah, definitely, because we think that you as alumni are very well placed to participate in an initiative like this. You're already people who care about refugee issues, and you are part of a national network of volunteers who have, on occasion, met each other at the International Forum, at leadership meetings, at regional meetings. And so, like I said, we were quite impressed, not too surprised, but really pleased about the response that we received really quickly of people that want to participate in this initiative. Do you want to take it from the B4 fund? No. Yeah, I mean, so one of the things about the this B4 fund, unfortunately they don't have a better name than B4, but the B4 fund is that it's time bound. So the objective is for refugees to be able to arrive here in Canada before December 31st, 2019. And we have to apply as a network for these funds to support the refugees, individuals or refugee families before August 31st or until the fund runs out. So there are other organizations like WUSC across Canada that are mobilizing their networks and providing this opportunity. So we are going to be able to connect our refugee sponsorship network groups to the fund for as long as that fund is still available. Great. The one thing that the fund doesn't cover, which Ashley is going to talk about, is the startup costs, which are basically if you were ever on a SRP sponsoring group or on a local committee, the startup costs in this context are about the same as an initial settling in cost. So stuff like vetting, yeah, all those things. Oh, you're going to go through the list. Okay. Yeah, so WUSC alumni, not only are you people who are you individuals that care about forced migration issues, you have experience supporting in the integration or have experienced the integration process yourself, but you also have really neat networks that could be really beneficial for people who come to Canada through other channels, not just through the student refugee program. So in my mind, it's an opportunity to connect other newcomers also to higher education or college or further studies in their communities if that's something that they want for themselves. And you've already created all these networks with employers, employment opportunities for students, CVs, like, yeah, you're just really well placed. And so we're really excited about this initiative. So I'll let Ashley continue with more details about the BVOR program, but I'm going to be monitoring the chat. So Rita, you have a question. Do you want to ask that in the chat? And it's really difficult to follow the, yeah, because you can't scroll up, or like you can, but then you lose. I will do that.
So I think Michelle gave a brief overview of the steps related to the Blended Visa Office Referred initiative. So it's specifically the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees identifies people in urgent need of protection. The Canadian government verifies eligibility and admissibility for immigration. And then there's a list of people that, as a sponsorship agreement holder at WUSC, we can go into that list and select people that would be well placed to be matched with what we're calling the Refugee Sponsorship Network sponsoring groups. So again, we don't get to select the individuals like we do in the student refugee program, but we do get to sort of identify people within that group that would be beneficial to either be resettled to a certain community where the Refugee Support Network groups may be, or there may be, connections in that community that could be of value. And then the sponsors, as Michelle said, provide the settlement and integration support for the full duration of the 12-month sponsorship period. 6 months of basic living cost is provided by the Canadian government, and 6 months is provided by the sponsor. But in this case, as Michelle said, that is covered by what's called the BVOR fund. So we'll go over in a little bit more detail throughout the rest of the presentation. So it's important to note that refugees, again, cannot be named or identified by the sponsor. And the general profile of a BVOR case, they're typically vulnerable populations, and I'll get into a little bit more details on that, may have single or multiple family members, and may need, their needs may be more complex, and sometimes their health needs are higher than individuals that we may select through, let's say, the student refugee program, for example. So when we look at the list of where people on the list of the BVOR program are located, or their nationalities, Syrians, Iraqis, Iranians, Congolese, Ethiopians, Eritreans, Somalis, South Sudanese, and Colombians. And so considering those populations are representative in many ways of those that have been sponsored through the student refugee program, so there could be a lot of value in engaging our network, as Michelle said, to respond to people coming from those countries. And then I think the vulnerabilities as outlined by the government and by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, they're prioritizing women and girls at risk, LGBTQ+, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, and queer plus, as there are another number of other names that go into that category, survivors of torture and violence, and people that have lack of a foreseeable alternative for durable solutions. So that's the type of population that we would be looking at in this fund. And Michelle wants to make a comment. Mm-hmm. Yes, arrive quickly. Yeah. So Yar has raised their hand. So Yar, not sure. Yeah. If you want to maybe type your question in the chat box, because I don't think we can hear you, and we'll make sure to answer those questions. And so if we talk about the blended visa office referred program, okay, yeah, we'll pay attention to making sure we switch to Mike. Michelle, do you want to say your piece again? Yeah. So Michelle was just reiterating and just emphasizing that these people that are eligible for this program are quite high needs, vulnerable population that we want to make sure they arrive quickly. They're in urgent need of protection. And so they are trying to get, the Canadian government is trying to get them here as quickly as possible. Yeah, sure. Can you guys still hear me okay? Tyler, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, yeah. So we're trying a different mic.
No, it's not working.
No, it's not working. I don't know.
Okay.
We're going to keep going. So in terms of the expectations of the sponsoring group, we have 12 months of support. So that's the same as in the student refugee program. There's sort of a large responsibility when the individual first arrives, getting everything set up for their arrival, for individuals or families. So the initial settling and orientation, so that includes making sure they have housing, getting their documentation all set up, settlement, getting access to settlement services, providing community orientation, access to language learning, and perhaps enrollment in school if there are school-age children within any of the groups that are providing sponsorship for families. And then there's that ongoing support, so health, social and family needs, education, employment. So those are sort of the ongoing things that we would expect of the sponsoring groups that are participating in the program. And so just to reiterate again, the funding of this program comes from 6 months of support from the federal government, 6 months of support from the BVOR fund, or the Blended Visa Officer Referred Fund, and then there is this initial settling cost. And so we're going to talk about that in the next slide, which is the startup costs, and that is the responsibility of the sponsoring group. And so that can be a combination of in-kind and cash-related things. So startup costs or initial settling costs could be basic household needs, furniture, clothing. If they're arriving anywhere between October to December, obviously getting set with winter clothing, any utility installation, phone, cable, internet, all that jazz, linens, and school-age children. Again, if you are involved in sponsoring a family with school-age children, their school supplies, so backpacks and pencils and pens and books and all those fun things. And then the support that comes from the BVOR fund and the government, so that 6 months, covers quite basic living costs, so food and incidentals, housing, and a housing supplement. So in some cities, like, I don't quote me on this, but like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, where housing is very expensive, there's a small top-up fee eligible in those particular places. There's communications allowance, transportation, and that's again dependent on the municipality in which you're residing and the cost there. The age of majority top-up, so if you are involved in the sponsorship of a family with dependents living with family members over the age of 18 or 19 years old, depending on the province, there's an additional amount of money that can go to that individual within a family case. There's also special dietary allowances for individuals that may have dietary needs beyond what the basic food and incidental fund allows, as well as there's maternity food allowance and some maternity support for any family members that may be pregnant during that 12-month period. All remaining costs are the responsibility of the sponsoring group. So anything that goes above and beyond sort of those key pieces that the sponsoring group chooses to offer to the individual would be your responsibility financially. So we wanted to talk about you guys creating your RSN, or Refugee Support Network groups. So there must be a minimum of 5, so that's the same as our local committees. So 5 people, and we've suggested to have a minimum of 2 former WUSC local committee or former SRP alumni that would make up a group. A group can be made up of more than 2 former local committee alumni or SRP alumni, but we want at least 2 of them involved in the group. So who could those other members be? Family members, friends, people in your community, people from your faith-based group, people from your school network, exactly, employment, places of employment. So the list can go on. If you guys have other ideas, please throw them in the chat box for us so we can make sure to share that with everyone. So again, you can go above and beyond, and I think that's important to consider when you are making up your group. We want to talk about who are the members of your group and what kind of support can they provide. If everybody's at the sort of same age and stage in their life, it may be challenging to be available at certain times of the day or certain times of the week, depending on the group that you're sponsoring. So considering who in your group is available at different times of the day, if everybody's working a 9-to-5 job, that could put some challenge to the group. Obviously, we want you to think about who on your group has knowledge about different topics in the community, employment, education system, getting kids involved in programs after school, all sorts of different topics that you would want to keep in mind. What social connections are going to be added with different members of the group, skill development, and then, as I said, that life stage. If it's all sort of like people in their early 20s, you may want to consider engaging some older people as well in your sponsoring group who could add a different perspective to supporting those that may be sponsored through this initiative. Yeah. Do you want to say something? Do you want to unmute?
Yeah, so what I didn't mention at the beginning, but what made me think of this when Ashley said employment is that WUSC last year, our staff people that work here at the office created 2 groups. And we did a call out to see how many people were interested, and we had enough for 2 groups. 2 groups to create, so we were able to sponsor 2 families last year with the fund. And it was really helpful. We had some retired staff also join our group. And what we have learned, with most of us working from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, is that a lot of the services that need to be done during, and you'll remember this from being students, a lot of the things that need to be done have to happen between 9 to 5. And if you work a 9 to 5 job, it's very difficult to support the person that you're sponsoring in some of the services that they need. So having people who are on maternity leave or who are who don't have jobs that are strict 9 to 5 is also really helpful for doing some of the things. The other thing that we didn't mention, but I think Ashley might mention it after, but I'm going to say it now, is that so we talked about different people that you can reach out to. Everybody has indicated whether they want to be connected to other people in their community from the WUSC network that is interested in sponsoring. And so as a follow-up to this webinar in the coming week or 2, we will be connecting you by email so that you can meet up and decide who's still in and who wants to form a group. And sometimes you might need to create more than one group or you might be able to create more than one group because there's so many of you in a given city. And then for those where you're the lone wolf in your town, Sydney, Nova Scotia, we can talk to you about how you can engage people in your community to create your groups.
Camera. So Rita has a question there. Will the refugee be matched to the most relevant related community? So that's ultimately our goal. We will be picking, I haven't shared my video. Sorry about that, guys. So we will be working to do as best matching as we can, given the profile of the individuals or the families being sponsored and the groups that are being created. So we'll definitely have sort of a matching profile effort.
and sometimes they are already being destined to a specific city because they have family linkages in those cities.
Okay.
So when we go through the list of people, it actually says this person should go to Calgary or whatever. Yeah.
So I'll just repeat that. When we have, when we look at the list as the sponsorship agreement holder, we can see in some cases people are going to be sent to a specific community, and so we would be looking to match a group to where that community, that individual would be destined to, is the terminology, but that's not necessarily every case, but we would be working to try to support that matching. And then the other question is, are the startup costs the responsibility of the RSN groups? So yes, that is the responsibility of the RSN groups. And again, that can be a combination of in-kind or cash purchased things. And just to jump back up here, that's this sort of list here, the startup costs. I'm going to keep going here. So another really important component for the sponsoring group composition is that all members need to be living in the community where the sponsored person is going to reside. So that sort of speaks to Aretha's question as well, that we will be matching people in the community where the individual is supposed to be resettled to. And then obviously you want to consider engaging people that are motivated to do sponsorship for a 12-month period. You want to make sure that people are willing to tie themselves to this initiative for that period of time, and that there is sort of that expectation that they will be available and around to support the settlement and integration of individuals upon and after arrival. So just quickly to overview what WUSC is going to be providing to support and facilitate the Refugee Support Network across Canada. So we're going to have a dedicated staff person who is going to be supporting the groups all across the country. We are going to have some materials to help you recruit and engage your networks, review and approve the sponsorship applications. So once you have your group formed, then you would be submitting an application to us. We spoke a lot about this, the matching of the groups with the persons or families to be sponsored, as well as supporting completing the immigration forms, and providing web-based training, such as we are today, to prepare for arrival and settlement and integration of persons or families to be sponsored, as well as providing that ongoing sort of customized support and response to the network throughout the sponsorship period, as we do in the local committee network.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the process for identifying families? Like, that we receive a list and that we can people within that good fits for the groups that are sponsoring?
Yeah, so as we were speaking a little bit about before, so the Government of Canada provides this list of individuals that are eligible to be sponsored through the BVOR program, and so we can look at the profile of those individuals or those families and work to match them with the profiles of the RSN groups that we are going to have created all across Canada. So that's something that we'll do our best to make those appropriate linkages. Did you want to say something more?
Well, just as I mentioned in the chat, we're going to be collecting information. We're going to be collecting information from all the groups about their capacity to sponsor. So in your case, or it might be an individual. They are referring individual cases to Canada. So there might be young individuals sort of around your age group, or there might be if your group decides that it would be able to support a family with children or a large family. All of that information will be gathered from you, and then we would be looking for profiles that meet your capacities as a group and are the best fit to Rita's question.
I can do that. Okay, so in terms of, so you're interested, what do you do next? So WUSC, as Michelle sort of just reiterated, we will be making connections between network members from that initial expression of interest where we had over 100 respondents. So trying to make people know of who else could possibly be in their group. So we'll be facilitating that over the next couple of weeks. And then once your group is formed, you'll create the group and email us at the rsn@wusc.ca, and then we will go from there and really formalizing and moving the process forward. You'll be completing an application form, which we will share to the network, and these all must be submitted by August 31st. So it's
I mean, before that.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So, really this is as soon as possible because the fund expires on August 31st. And so the sooner that groups can respond and submit their applications, the better. So if you have a group ready to go, email us at rsn@wusc.ca and we will respond with the application form, and we can start the immigration process quite quickly. I think as we sort of spoke about at the beginning of the session, these are people in urgent need of protection and vulnerable populations. And so the government is able to move these people through the immigration process. They've already moved pretty far through the immigration process and they're just waiting for that sponsorship linkage. So they can arrive within 2 to 4 months. So it's quite a fast process on the in Canada side. It probably doesn't feel so fast on the other side of things, but so that's really important to emphasize that as soon as you have a group ready to go, we have to get the process started to be eligible for that fund to cover that 6 months of income for the individuals being resettled. Once the application is submitted, we will work with you to create a settlement plan, raising funds and in-kind donations for the initial settlement needs, as you guys were asking about. We are also going to support and suggest people get vulnerable sector screening of group members, as well starting to organize and prepare for arrival. So the individuals can arrive anywhere from 2 months after a sponsorship application is submitted and the immigration forms are triggered, up until, as Michelle said, December 31st. So it's quite a short time frame. And then in regards to what WUSC is going to do, so we're going to be matching the RSN groups with persons or families to be sponsored once we have those groups in place. We're going to be applying for the funds on behalf of the group so that you guys have access to that money for the sponsorship to start. We'll be supporting in the development of communications materials and messaging to your network, as well as providing training as needed to prepare for arrival and support. In regards to raising funds, WUSC does have a fundraising platform that we can share for those that may be interested in going down that route for the initial settling cost or any other costs that you might think you want to raise money for in this particular initiative. Who to ask? Did you have any thoughts for who to ask?
For money?
For money?
That's what I mean. That's what I meant by that, yeah.
So, we always can consider people in our networks that may be interested in providing financial support or in-kind support. Yeah, exactly. Anything from furniture donations to, technology. We all have older technology as we reuse our technology so frequently these days. Even, clothing, linens, those types of things, as the list sort of mentioned. You can consider who you may ask in your network that could support the gathering of those items as you start to anticipate the arrival. Michelle mentioned earlier that she was part of a group here at WUSC who participated in this program last year, and they asked all the staff in the office to come in and bring in different items. They sort of made an inventory of items that they needed because this was a family of 4, 2 children, and with 2 adults with 2 children, and they collected more than they needed. Yeah. And a bunch of stuff then just got donated to the Salvation Army here in Ottawa. So, those are really great networks to consider: your workplace, your faith-based groups, your community centers. People generally want to get involved and be part of an initiative like this. And you guys are great leaders to get people involved and engaged. And I think, we don't like to say it's an unintended consequence, but perhaps an intended consequence is that we're also reaching new people that haven't been involved in refugee sponsorship or may not know about refugee issues. And so you're going to reach out and help people learn about what's happening around the world and what role they can play. And then the last point that we just had there was World Refugee Day is coming up. Who in the chat box can tell me what day World Refugee Day is? Fastest. World Refugee Day. It's a celebratory day, recognizing the accomplishments. Yari's on it. Oh, June 20th. Excellent. So it's coming up really fast, but that could be an opportunity to just raise awareness, engage your networks, talk about why you're getting involved, and try to get your network to sign on and commit to being part of your sponsoring group. Did you want to add anything more for that?
No, I was just thinking about whether or not I can open up that fundraising platform, but we will send more information about it. But there's an online platform where your donors can also get tax receipts through that platform.
Right, and so there was a question from William earlier, and can the donations for the initial settling costs go towards taxable receipts? And so if they contribute their funds through our online fundraising platform that will go directly to your group, WUSC can issue them charitable tax receipts. So that's a great question, and thanks for reminding us of that, Michelle. And then the last piece here is just some resources and information. I guess you can't click on this, but I'll send you guys a copy of the presentation tomorrow. So a little bit around the BVOR program, so you can get some more details there. And then this is the RAP rate, so it's the Resettlement Assistance Program rates by province. So this gives you a sense of what the expectations are for income, and so it'll give you a sense of the amount of money that the individual or family is going to get based on the rate set by the government. So that will be reflected in the 6 months support from the government and the 6 months of financial support from the BVOR fund. And then finally, just reminding everybody that we do have a Refugee Support Network FAQ, which is pretty up to date in English and French, that does provide a pretty good sense of the program. But if there are questions there that you are not feeling like you're getting your answers from, definitely anytime email the RSN, I was going to spell out the acronym, rsn@wusc.ca, and we've got people monitoring that, mostly me. So I will respond to you. So we'll just pause there. Michelle, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think I would
open it up.
I would open it up for
yeah,
questions.
Great. So we're going to open it up for questions.
And Rita was asking if...
Yeah, presentation, copy of the presentation. Certainly. We actually are recording this, so we will provide, we'll send the recording, we'll send the slide deck, and we'll be following up with everyone. Any other questions from the group? A couple people are writing. No problem. I'm going to stop recording.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.